The scream that tore through the morning air from my sister's house still echoes in my mind. But to understand why Rebecca screamed like her world was ending, I need to tell you about the gift bag my 8-year-old daughter Emma received at her birthday party, and the note inside that changed everything. I'm Sarah, I'm 32, and I've been raising Emma on my own since she was born. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, like you're watching everyone else's life through glass while yours happens in the shadows, please hit that subscribe button. I promise this story will give you strength until the very last minute, because sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who end up losing everything. But this story doesn't start with Rebecca's scream. It starts 30 years ago when I was just 2 years old and my sister Rebecca was 7. Even then, I could feel it, that invisible wall between me and the rest of my family. Rebecca was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, and I was just there. I remember my 10th birthday like it was yesterday. Rebecca had gotten this massive party when she turned 10, a bounce house in the backyard, clowns, 30 kids from school, and a 3-tier princess cake from the fancy bakery downtown. The whole neighbourhood came. Mum spent weeks planning it, calling it Rebecca's special day and posting about it on Facebook like she was planning a royal wedding. When my 10th birthday came around, I woke up so excited. I'd been dreaming about having my own bounce house, my own fancy cake. I ran downstairs in my pyjamas, expecting to see decorations, maybe some balloons. Instead, I found Mom at the kitchen table with her coffee, scrolling through her phone. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said without looking up. "I picked up some cupcakes from the grocery store. They're on the counter." 6 cupcakes from the grocery store, in a plastic container. "Where's my party?" I asked, my voice small. Mum finally looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes, not malice exactly, but this tired indifference that somehow hurt worse than anger would have. "Oh, honey, we can't do a big party every year. That's just not realistic. Besides, you're more of a quiet child. You wouldn't want all that chaos anyway." But Rebecca had gotten a party the year before, and the year before that, and she'd get one the year after. I spent that birthday in my room, eating grocery store cupcakes and wondering what was wrong with me. Why wasn't I worth the effort? Why didn't I deserve to feel special? The pattern continued through everything. When I made honor roll for the first time in 6th grade, bringing home a certificate I was so proud of, I practically ran into the house waving it above my head. "Look, Mom, look what I got." She glanced at it while stirring something on the stove. "That's nice, Sarah. Rebecca, tell your sister about the solo you got in choir." And just like that, my moment was gone. Rebecca launched into this detailed story about her choir performance while I stood there holding my honor roll certificate, feeling it turn to ash in my hands. At graduation, the same thing happened. I was valedictorian, the top of my entire class. I'd worked so hard, staying up late studying while Rebecca was out with friends, sacrificing weekends and social events to maintain my grades. When they called my name for the speech, I looked out into the audience, searching for my family. They were there, but they were all looking at their phones. Dad was checking emails. Mum was taking pictures of other people's kids. Rebecca was texting someone, probably complaining about how boring this was. After the ceremony, families were gathering for pictures. I watched as other graduates posed with proud parents, grandparents, siblings. My family took exactly 3 photos with me, and in all of them they looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. But they took at least 30 photos with Rebecca when she graduated 2 years later, with her 3.2 GPA and no special honours. Those photos were all over Facebook within an hour, with captions like, "So proud of our amazing daughter," and "Rebecca's big day." The breaking point came when I was 16. I'd applied for a full scholarship to Northwestern University, a full ride, academic excellence, the works. It was one of the most prestigious scholarships they offered, and only 10 students in the entire country received it each year. When the acceptance letter came, I was shaking as I opened it. Full scholarship, full ride, they wanted me. I ran into the living room where my parents were watching TV with Rebecca. "I got it. I got the full scholarship to Northwestern." I expected cheers, hugs, maybe even tears of joy. Instead, my father muted the TV and looked at me with this expression I'll never forget, like I'd just told him I'd found $1 on the sidewalk. "Well, that's good, Sarah. College is important." That was it. That was all. Rebecca looked up from her phone. "Northwestern's in Chicago, right? That's so far away. Why would you want to go somewhere you don't know anyone?" "Rebecca's going to state," Mom chimed in. "Much more practical. She'll be close to home, and the in-state tuition is so reasonable." "But this is a full scholarship," I said, my voice cracking. "A full ride to one of the best universities in the country." Dad shrugged. "Rebecca will do just fine at state. Don't think this makes you special, Sarah. Plenty of kids get scholarships." But plenty of kids didn't get this scholarship, 10 kids, in the entire country. I went to my room that night and cried until I couldn't breathe. I realized something that would shape the rest of my relationship with my family. I would never be enough. No matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, I would always be the afterthought, the disappointment, the one who tried too hard. The final nail in the coffin came when I was 22 and found myself pregnant with Emma. I'd been dating Jake for 2 years, and we'd talked about marriage, but when I told him about the baby, he disappeared. Literally. Moved out of his apartment without telling me, blocked my number, vanished into thin air. I was scared, alone, and broke. I swallowed my pride and called my parents. "I need help," I told Mom over the phone. "I'm pregnant, and Jake's gone, and I don't know what to do." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Mom spoke. "Sarah, you're an adult. You made your choices. We can't fix your mistakes." "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I need support. I need my family." "What about Northwestern? What about your big scholarship? Seems like you threw that away pretty quickly." I had thrown it away. I'd turned down Northwestern to stay closer to home, hoping that somehow, if I was physically closer to my family, I might finally become part of it. Instead, I'd gone to the local community college, worked part-time jobs, tried to make myself available for family dinners and birthday parties and holidays, always hoping that this time they'd include me, this time they'd care. "This baby changes things," Mum continued. "Rebecca's getting married next spring, and we're not going to have any drama at her wedding. We're not going to have people talking about our unwed pregnant daughter." Rebecca got on the phone then. Her voice was cold, clinical. "Sarah, I'm going to be very clear with you. This is my time. This is my year. I'm not going to let you ruin it with your poor choices. If you decide to keep this baby, don't expect us to pretend everything is normal." "Rebecca, I'm your sister." "No," she said, and I'll never forget the finality in her voice. "You were my sister. Now you're just someone who shares my last name." The line went dead. I didn't hear from any of them for the rest of my pregnancy. I gave birth to Emma alone, held her tiny, perfect body in that hospital room with no flowers, no balloons, no family to call with the good news. The nurse kept asking if anyone was coming to visit, and I kept making excuses until finally I just stopped answering. Rebecca's wedding happened 6 months later. I saw the photos on Facebook, hundreds of them. The entire extended family was there. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, family friends, neighbours, everyone except me. I wasn't even invited. When I saw the family photos, the ones with all the siblings and their spouses, there was just this empty space where I should have been standing. That's when I understood that I'd been erased. Not just excluded, erased. As far as my family was concerned, I simply didn't exist anymore. For 10 years, I built a life for Emma and myself in the shadows of the family I'd once belonged to. I worked 2 jobs, one at a medical office during the day, another cleaning offices at night after Emma went to bed. Every dollar was stretched, every expense considered, but Emma never went without. She had clothes that fit, food on the table, a mother who showed up to every school event and read to her every single night. The hardest part wasn't the money or the exhaustion, it was the questions. "Mommy, why don't I have a grandma and grandpa like the other kids? Mommy, do I have any aunts or uncles? Mommy, why is it just us?" How do you explain to a child that your own family decided you weren't worth loving? How do you tell an 8-year-old that some people, even people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, can just choose to stop? I did my best to fill the gaps. I became Emma's mother and father, her biggest cheerleader, her safe place. When she started showing an interest in science, I bought used textbooks and taught myself chemistry so I could help with her projects. When she wanted to learn piano, I worked extra shifts to pay for lessons. Emma flourished despite everything. She was brilliant, not just smart, but genuinely gifted. Her teachers constantly praised her curiosity, her creativity, her kindness. She won the 3rd grade science fair with a project about renewable energy that was honestly better than some high school presentations I'd seen. But sometimes I'd catch her looking sad, and I knew she was thinking about the family she'd never known. She'd see her friends with their big extended families at school events and wonder what she was missing. Rebecca, meanwhile, was living her best life on social media. She'd married David, a successful accountant, and they'd bought a beautiful house in the suburbs. She posted constantly about family dinners with our parents, holiday celebrations, weekend trips. In every photo, they looked like the perfect American family. And in every photo, there was no sign that Rebecca had ever had a sister. The worst part was watching my parents embrace their role as grandparents to Rebecca's twin boys, Mason and Tyler. They babysit regularly, posting pictures of themselves at soccer games and school plays. Dad taught them to fish. Mom made them Halloween costumes. They had the childhood I dreamed of giving Emma, and she had the grandparents Emma would never know. I tried not to let Emma see how much it hurt, but kids are perceptive. She knew something was missing, and she knew it had something to do with the family we never talked about. This year, Emma won 1st place in the district-wide science competition. 1st place out of hundreds of students from dozens of schools. Her project on sustainable water filtration was so impressive that the local newspaper wanted to do a story about her. I was so proud I could barely contain myself. This was my daughter, brilliant, creative, determined. She'd inherited none of her father's weakness and all of the strength I'd been forced to develop. "Mommy," she said after the award ceremony, "can we have a real birthday party this year, like the ones on TV?" My heart broke a little. Emma had never asked for much, but I could see how much this meant to her. She wanted to celebrate, wanted to feel special, wanted to invite people and have them actually come. "Of course, baby. We'll have the best birthday party ever." I spent weeks planning it. I rented a small community centre, hired a magician, ordered a custom cake shaped like a microscope to honour her love of science. I invited her entire class, bought decorations, planned games. It was going to be perfect. But as I was addressing invitations, I found myself staring at a blank envelope. After 10 years of silence, after being erased and forgotten, I made a decision that would change everything. I invited my family. I know it sounds crazy. I know they'd made it clear I didn't exist in their world. But this was Emma's day, and she deserved to have her family there. She deserved to meet her grandparents and her aunt and her cousins. She deserved to feel like she belonged somewhere. I wrote the invitations with shaking hands. You're invited to celebrate Emma's 8th birthday. She recently won first place in the district science competition and would love to share this special day with family. I included the date, time, and location. I included a photo of Emma holding her trophy, smiling so big her eyes crinkled shut. She looked just like me at that age, before the world taught me I wasn't worth celebrating. I almost didn't send them. I must have picked up those 3 envelopes a dozen times, ready to throw them away. What was the point? They'd made their feelings clear. But then I looked at Emma, practicing the speech she wanted to give about her science project, so excited about her party, and I knew I had to try. For her. I mailed the invitations on a Tuesday. By Friday I still hadn't heard anything. No RSVPs, no phone calls, nothing. I told myself I wasn't disappointed. This was what I'd expected. But then, the day before the party, my phone rang. I didn't recognise the number. Sarah? It's Rebecca? I nearly dropped the phone. After 10 years of silence, her voice sounded exactly the same. Rebecca. I got your invitation, we'll be there. That was it. No, how are you, or I've missed you, or I'm sorry for the last decade. Just, we'll be there. Okay, I managed. Emma will be so excited to meet. But she'd already hung up. I spent that entire night wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. What if they came just to judge us? What if they were cruel to Emma? What if seeing them again opened up all the wounds I'd worked so hard to heal? But it was too late now. Emma was over the moon when I told her that her aunt and grandparents were coming to her party. Really, Mommy, I'm finally going to meet them. Really, baby? Will they like me? They'll love you, I said, praying it was true. The party was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. I arrived early to set up, my stomach churning with anxiety and hope in equal measure. The community centre looked perfect, bright decorations, tables set with science-themed plates and napkins, the custom cake displayed proudly on its own special table. Emma's classmates started arriving right on time, and for a while I was able to lose myself in the joy of watching my daughter celebrate with her friends. She was radiant, showing off her trophy, explaining her science project to anyone who would listen. This was what I'd wanted for her, to feel special, to feel celebrated. My parents arrived first. They looked older, greyer, but still exactly like I remembered. Mum was carrying a small gift bag, and Dad had his hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. They approached me cautiously, like I might bolt. "Hello, Sarah," Mum said. "Hi, Mum. Thank you for coming." We stood there awkwardly for a moment, 10 years of silence stretching between us. Then Emma appeared at my side, looking up at them with curious eyes. "Emma," I said, my voice catching slightly, "these are your grandparents." Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? You're my grandma and grandpa?" Mum's expression softened just a little. "Yes, sweetie. We are. Emma threw her arms around Mum's legs, hugging her tight. "I've always wanted to meet you. Mommy has pictures, but you're even better in real life." I watched Mum's face crumble slightly at Emma's pure, innocent joy. For just a moment, I thought maybe this would be okay. Maybe they'd finally see what they'd been missing. Then Rebecca arrived. She swept in with David and their twins like she owned the place. Mason and Tyler, now 10 years old, immediately ran off to join the other kids. Rebecca looked around the room with barely concealed disdain, taking in the modest decorations, the community centre setting, the crowd of 8-year-olds. "Sarah," she said, her voice neutral, "this is nice." She was wearing designer clothes and carrying a purse that probably cost more than my rent. Everything about her screamed success, wealth, perfection. Standing next to her, I felt like I was 8 years old again, holding my honour roll certificate while she got all the attention. "Emma," I called to my daughter, "come meet your Aunt Rebecca." Emma bounded over, still glowing with excitement. "Aunt Rebecca, I'm so happy you came. Do you want to see my trophy? I won first place in the whole district." Rebecca looked down at Emma with an expression I couldn't quite read. "That's good for you. Not, that's amazing, or I'm so proud. Just, that's good for you." Like Emma had mentioned, she'd finished her vegetables. The party continued, but I could feel the tension building. My family stood off to the side, watching, but not really participating. The other parents were warm and friendly, congratulating Emma, asking about her science project. But my own family looked like they were attending a funeral. Emma tried so hard to connect with them. She showed Mason and Tyler her microscope, tried to include them in the games, but they seemed bored, unimpressed. They kept looking at their phones, asking their mother when they could leave. The breaking point came during present time. Emma sat in the centre of the room, surrounded by gifts from her classmates and their families. She opened each one with genuine excitement and gratitude, thanking everyone enthusiastically. The pile of opened presents grew steadily, and Emma's smile got bigger with each one. Finally, only one gift remained, a small bag that Rebecca had placed on the table. "This one's from your Aunt Rebecca," I said, trying to keep my voice light. Emma's eyes lit up. "Really? From my aunt?" She reached for the bag eagerly, pulling out the tissue paper. Inside was a small notebook, the kind you can buy at any dollar store. But it was what was attached to the notebook that made my blood freeze. A note written in Rebecca's perfect handwriting. "Try harder next year." The room fell silent. Other parents looked confused, not understanding what they'd just witnessed. Emma stared at the note, her 8-year-old mind trying to process what it meant. "Try harder?" she asked quietly. "But I won first place." Rebecca's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Well, there's always room for improvement, isn't there?" A few people chuckled nervously, not sure if this was some kind of joke they weren't understanding. But I saw Emma's face crumble, saw the exact moment her joy turned to confusion and hurt. "I don't understand," Emma whispered, looking up at me with tears starting to form in her eyes. "Why would she want me to try harder? I did try hard. I tried so hard, Mommy." Something inside me broke. 10 years of swallowing my pride, of accepting scraps, of being grateful for any acknowledgement at all. 10 years of telling myself that maybe if I was patient enough, kind enough, perfect enough, they might remember they loved me. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about my daughter, my brilliant, beautiful, innocent daughter who had done nothing wrong except exist, who had worked so hard, who had achieved something genuinely incredible, who had been so excited to finally meet her family, and they had crushed her. I stood up slowly, my hands shaking. The room was still silent, everyone sensing that something terrible had just happened but not quite understanding what. "Emma," I said quietly, "get your coat." "But Mommy, the party, we're leaving." I didn't say goodbye. I didn't thank Rebecca for coming. I didn't try to smooth things over or make excuses. I simply took my daughter's hand and walked out of that community centre, leaving behind the cake and the decorations and the family that had never been mine to begin with. Emma cried the whole way home. "What did I do wrong, Mommy? Why didn't she like my trophy? Why did she want me to try harder?" I pulled over twice because I was crying too hard to see the road. How do you explain cruelty to a child? How do you tell an 8-year-old that some people enjoy hurting others, even when those others are innocent children who just want to be loved? That night, I tucked Emma into bed and held her while she cried herself to sleep. I stroked her hair and whispered all the things I wish someone had whispered to me when I was her age. You are enough. You are worthy of love. You did nothing wrong. You are perfect, exactly as you are. But as I sat in her dark room listening to her snuffle in her sleep, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being the victim. I was done accepting cruelty as the price of family. I was done letting people hurt my daughter. The next morning, I made a phone call that would turn my world upside down. "Michael, it's Sarah. I need your help." Michael Peterson had been my divorce attorney when Jake had briefly reappeared in our lives, trying to claim parental rights 2 years ago. He was sharp, thorough, and had a reputation for fighting for the underdog. "Sarah, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" I told him about the party, about the note, about 10 years of being erased from my own family. My voice shook as I described watching Emma's face crumble, seeing her joy turn to confusion and hurt. "I'm done," I said finally. "I'm done being treated like I don't exist. But Michael, there's something I never told you, something about my grandmother's will." Michael was quiet for a moment. "What about it?" "When my grandmother died 5 years ago, Rebecca was named the executor. She handled everything, the funeral, the estate, all of it. She told us Grandma had left everything to be split equally among her children, which meant it went to my parents, and they were managing it. Okay. But the thing is, Grandma and I were close, really close. She was the only family member who ever seemed to actually see me, you know? She used to tell me I was special, that I was going to do great things. She always said she was proud of me." "Sarah, where are you going with this?" "I never saw the will, Michael. None of us did, except Rebecca. She just told us what was in it, and we accepted it. But what if? What if what? What if there was more to it? What if Grandma left something specifically for me, and Rebecca just didn't mention it?" Michael was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, that's a serious accusation. Are you saying you think Rebecca might have hidden part of your grandmother's will?" "I'm saying I think it's worth looking into. Grandma used to tell me that she was going to make sure I was taken care of, that she saw how my family treated me, and it wasn't right. What if she actually did something about it? Do you know where the will was probated?" "County courthouse, I think. Rebecca handled everything through some lawyer downtown. Sarah, if what you're suggesting is true, if Rebecca concealed part of your grandmother's will, that's not just wrong, it's illegal. That's fraud. But you need to understand, if we start digging into this and we find nothing, it could make your relationship with your family even worse." I thought about Emma's tear-stained face, about the note that told my brilliant daughter to try harder after she'd achieved something incredible. "Michael, my relationship with my family can't get any worse. And more importantly, I need to show my daughter that we don't have to accept being treated like we don't matter. We deserve better than this." "Okay," Michael said. "Let me make some calls." 3 hours later, my phone rang. "Sarah, you need to sit down." "What did you find?" "I found the original will, the real will, and Sarah, you need to come to my office right now." "Just tell me, Michael." "Your grandmother left you everything. The house, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio, everything. It's worth about $2.5 million. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. $2.5 million. The house where Rebecca was currently living, the house she'd been living in for 5 years, the house she'd been claiming was rightfully managed by my parents, that house belonged to me. The savings account that had supposedly been split among my parents' children, that belonged to me too. Everything belonged to me." I picked up the phone with shaking hands. "Michael, how is that possible? Rebecca said—" "Rebecca lied, Sarah. She's been living in your house, managing your money, and pretending your grandmother left everything to be split equally. But the will is very clear, and it's very specific. Your grandmother wrote a long explanation about why she was leaving everything to you." "What did she say?" Michael's voice was gentle. "She said she'd watched your family treat you like you didn't matter for your entire life, and she wanted to make sure you knew that you mattered to her. She said you were the only one who visited her regularly, the only one who called just to check on her, the only one who seemed to love her for who she was, rather than what she might leave behind." I was crying now, deep sobs that seemed to come from somewhere I'd locked away years ago. My grandmother had seen it. She'd seen how they treated me, and she'd cared enough to do something about it. "There's more, Sarah. She left a personal letter for you. Rebecca should have given it to you 5 years ago." "What does it say?" "I think you should read it yourself. But Sarah, the important thing right now is that Rebecca has been in violation of the law for 5 years. She's essentially stolen millions of dollars from you. We need to act quickly." I thought about that morning, about Rebecca waking up in the house that was legally mine, checking the bank accounts that she'd been illegally managing, going about her perfect life built on money that belonged to me and my daughter. I thought about Emma, about the note, about the way Rebecca had looked at my brilliant daughter like she was nothing special. What do? We file papers immediately. We demand she vacate the property and turn over all financial records. And Sarah? We make sure she understands that what she's done isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal. As I hung up the phone, I realized that tomorrow morning, Rebecca was going to wake up to the biggest shock of her life. She was going to discover that the sister she'd erased, the one she'd treated like dirt, the one whose daughter she'd just humiliated, that sister owned everything Rebecca thought was hers. And for the first time in 10 years, it was Rebecca who was going to be left with nothing. Michael's office was in one of those glass towers downtown that I'd driven past 1,000 times, but never imagined I'd have reason to enter. As I sat in the leather chair across from his mahogany desk, holding my grandmother's letter with trembling hands, I felt like I was living someone else's life. The letter was written in Grandma's careful script, the same handwriting I remembered from birthday cards and grocery lists. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I hope Rebecca has done the right thing by giving you this letter immediately. Knowing your sister as I do, I suspect she hasn't, which breaks my heart but doesn't surprise me. I've watched your family treat you like an afterthought your entire life, sweetheart. I've seen how they overlook your achievements, dismiss your feelings, and act like your love doesn't matter. It's taken me too many years to speak up, and I regret not doing more while I was alive. You were the only one who called me just to chat. You were the only one who remembered my favorite flowers when you visited. You were the only one who seemed to love me for who I was, not what I might leave behind. Rebecca and your parents visited dutifully, but their conversations always seemed to circle back to their own lives, their own needs. I'm leaving everything to you, Sarah, because you're the only one who understands what it means to give love without expecting anything in return. You're going to be a wonderful mother someday, and I want to make sure you and your children have the security I never had growing up. Don't let them make you feel guilty about this. You've earned every penny through a lifetime of genuine love and kindness. Build a beautiful life, my darling girl. You deserve it. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed. After 32 years of feeling invisible, of questioning my worth, of wondering if I was somehow fundamentally unlovable, here was proof that someone had seen me, someone had valued me, someone had loved me enough to ensure I'd be okay. Sarah, Michael said gently, I know this is overwhelming, but we need to move quickly. Every day Rebecca continues to live in that house and manage those accounts. She's committing fraud. The longer we wait, the more complicated this becomes. I wiped my eyes and looked up at him. What exactly are we talking about here? What's she been doing illegally? Michael opened a thick folder on his desk. Let me walk you through what I found. Your grandmother's estate was worth approximately $2.7 million at the time of her death. The house alone was appraised at $1.8 million. It's in Westfield Heights, right? I nodded. Westfield Heights was one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. I'd always wondered how Rebecca and David could afford to live there on an accountant's salary. The remaining $900,000 was in various investment accounts and savings. According to the will, all of this should have been transferred to you immediately upon probate. Instead, Rebecca filed paperwork claiming the estate was to be split equally among your parents' children, which would have meant she inherited half and your parents managed your theoretical quarter. But that's not what the will says at all. Not even close. The will explicitly names you as the sole beneficiary of all real property and financial assets. Rebecca was named executor, which means she was supposed to facilitate the transfer to you, not claim it for herself. Michael pulled out bank statements and property records. For 5 years, she's been living in your house, collecting rental income from your grandmother's other properties and managing investment accounts that belong to you. The rental income alone has been about $4,000 per month. I did the math quickly. That's $240,000 in rental income she's stolen. Plus the appreciation on the house and investments. Sarah, your inheritance has grown to about $3 million. Rebecca has been living a lifestyle funded entirely by money that legally belongs to you. The magnitude of it hit me like a truck. While I'd been working 2 jobs, stretching every dollar, worried about Emma's college fund, Rebecca had been living in luxury on money that was rightfully mine. Money my grandmother had left specifically for me because she'd seen how my family treated me. Michael, I want her out of my house. Today. It's not quite that simple. We need to follow legal procedures, but we can move fast. I'll file an emergency motion this afternoon for immediate possession of the property and all financial accounts. We'll also file a complaint for fraud and conversion. What does that mean? It means Rebecca is going to face both civil and criminal consequences. Civil court will order her to return all the money, plus damages and interest. Criminal court, well, fraud of this magnitude is a felony. She could face prison time. I thought about Emma, about the note, about years of being treated like I didn't exist. Do it. File everything. Michael nodded. I'll also need to arrange for a sheriff's deputy to serve the papers. Given the amount of money involved and the potential for Rebecca to try to hide assets, the court will likely grant our request for immediate relief. How long will this take? If I file today, we could have a court order by tomorrow morning. The sheriff could serve papers by tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon, less than 24 hours from now, Rebecca would discover that her entire life was built on a lie. The house she'd been calling home, the money she'd been spending, the lifestyle she'd been flaunting on social media, none of it had ever belonged to her. "There's one more thing, Sarah," Michael said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "I did some digging into Rebecca's finances. She and David took out a significant mortgage against the house last year." "A mortgage? But they don't own the house." "Exactly. They committed mortgage fraud. They used your property as collateral for a loan they had no legal right to obtain. That's a federal crime." The room spun a little. "How much did they borrow?" $400,000. I stared at him. 400,000? What did they do with that money? Michael pulled out more documents. Based on their financial records, they invested in David's brother's restaurant franchise, bought 2 new cars, and took several expensive vacations. They've been living well beyond their actual means, using your inheritance as their personal bank account. So, not only did they steal my money, they borrowed against my house to fund their lifestyle. That's exactly what they did. And Sarah, here's the kicker. The mortgage payments are behind. They've missed the last 3 payments. I felt sick. Are you saying they might lose the house? My house. I'm saying we need to act immediately to protect your assets. If the bank forecloses, this becomes exponentially more complicated. I stood up, pacing to the window. Down below, people walked along the sidewalks, going about their normal lives, unaware that my entire world was being turned upside down. Yesterday, I was a struggling single mother. Today, I was discovering I was worth $3 million. Tomorrow, my sister was going to learn she'd been committing federal crimes. "Michael, I want you to arrange a meeting." "A meeting?" "With my family, before you serve the papers. I want to tell them myself." Michael frowned. "Sarah, I don't think that's wise. If you tip them off, they might try to move assets or—" "They won't have time. You said you could file everything today and have court orders tomorrow morning, right?" "Yes, but then file everything first. Get the court orders. But before the sheriff serves them, I want 1 hour with my family. I want to look Rebecca in the eye when I tell her that the house she's been living in belongs to me. I want to see her face when she realizes what she's done." Michael looked concerned. "Sarah, I understand the desire for confrontation, but it's not about confrontation. It's about closure. For 32 years, I've been the one who gets surprised, who gets hurt, who gets left out. Just once, I want to be the one delivering the news that changes everything." After a long moment, Michael nodded. "Okay, but we do this my way. I'll call and request a family meeting at my office tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll tell them it's regarding your grandmother's estate and some irregularities that have come to light. I won't specify what kind of irregularities." "Will they come?" "Oh, they'll come. The word irregularities in relation to an estate worth millions of dollars will get their attention very quickly." I left Michael's office feeling like I was walking through a dream. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, my place in the world had been shattered and rebuilt in the span of 3 hours. I picked Emma up from school that afternoon and took her for ice cream, studying her face as she chattered about her day. She was still subdued from the party, still confused about why her aunt had been mean to her. But she was resilient, my daughter. She'd inherited my ability to bounce back from hurt. "Mommy," she said, licking chocolate ice cream off her spoon, "are we going to see Aunt Rebecca again?" "Maybe, sweetheart. Would you want to?" Emma considered this seriously. Only if she says sorry for being mean about my trophy. I worked really hard on my project. You did work hard, and you should be proud of yourself no matter what anyone else says. I am proud, but it would be nice if she was proud too. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat in our tiny apartment and tried to process everything. Tomorrow I would own a house worth $1.8 million. Tomorrow I would have access to investment accounts worth over $1 million more. Tomorrow Emma and I would never have to worry about money again. But more than that, tomorrow I would finally have proof that I mattered, that I had been loved, that my grandmother had seen my worth even when my own family couldn't. I barely slept that night. I kept imagining the meeting, picturing Rebecca's face when she learned the truth. Part of me felt guilty for looking forward to it, but a larger part, the part that had been hurt and ignored and erased for 3 decades, felt something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. Michael's office at 2 p.m. was standing room only. My parents sat in chairs across from Michael's desk, looking nervous and confused. Rebecca and David sat on the small couch, Rebecca checking her phone every few minutes, like she had somewhere more important to be. I sat in the chair next to Michael's desk, my hands folded in my lap, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. "Thank you all for coming," Michael began. "As I mentioned on the phone, some irregularities have come to light regarding Eleanor Williams's estate." Rebecca looked up from her phone. "What kind of irregularities? I handled everything according to the will." "Did you?" Michael asked calmly. He opened a folder and pulled out a document. "This is the original will, filed with the county clerk's office 5 years ago." He handed the document to my father, who put on his reading glasses and began to scan it. I watched his face change as he read, confusion giving way to shock. "I don't understand," Dad said slowly. This says everything goes to Sarah." Rebecca shot to her feet. "That's impossible. Let me see that." She snatched the will from Dad's hands and read it herself. The colour drained from her face. "This isn't right," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "There must be some mistake. Mum left everything to be divided equally. I have the paperwork." "You have fraudulent paperwork," Michael said calmly. "Paperwork you created to hide the fact that your grandmother left everything to Sarah." The room erupted. Mum started crying. David started asking questions rapid fire. Dad sat in stunned silence, but I was watching Rebecca. For the first time in my life, I saw my perfect sister, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, look genuinely afraid. "Rebecca," I said quietly, and everyone fell silent. "Did you know, when you opened the will 5 years ago, did you know what it really said?" She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, guilt mixed with defiance, mixed with desperation. "Sarah, you don't understand. You were pregnant, unmarried, struggling. You wouldn't have known how to manage that kind of money. I was protecting it for you." "You were protecting it? By living in my house? By spending my money? By taking out a mortgage on my property?" David's head snapped up. "What mortgage?" Rebecca's face went white. "Sarah, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been committing fraud for 5 years, that you've stolen nearly $3 million from me, that you used my house as collateral for a loan you had no right to take." $3 million? Mum whispered. "Mom," Michael spoke up. "Mrs. Williams left Sarah property and investments currently worth approximately $3 million. Rebecca has been illegally managing these assets and living off the income for 5 years." Dad looked at Rebecca with an expression I'd never seen him wear. Disappointment. "Rebecca, is this true?" "Daddy, I was going to tell everyone eventually. I just needed time to..." "To what?" I stood up, my voice growing stronger. To steal more money? To take out more fraudulent loans? To make sure I never found out what Grandma really wanted? I pulled out Grandma's letter and began to read it aloud. With every word, I watched my family's faces change. By the time I finished, Mom was sobbing, and Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years. She saw it, I said, my voice breaking. Grandma saw how you all treated me. She saw that I was the only one who loved her without expecting anything in return, and she wanted to make sure Emma and I were taken care of. Rebecca was crying now too, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic. Sarah, we're family. We can work this out. We can share. Share? I laughed, but there was no humour in it. Like you shared Emma's birthday party? Like you shared in celebrating her first-place science trophy? Like you've shared your life with me for the past 10 years? That's different. No, Rebecca, it's exactly the same. You've spent your entire life deciding what I deserve and when I deserve it. You decided I didn't deserve to know my grandmother loved me. You decided I didn't deserve the inheritance she left me. You decided my daughter didn't deserve kindness at her own birthday party. I turned to address the whole room. Yesterday, Rebecca gave my 8-year-old daughter a note telling her to try harder next year after Emma won first place in a district-wide science competition. She humiliated a child who had worked so hard to achieve something incredible, a child who was meeting her family for the first time and just wanted to be loved. Mum looked stricken. Sarah, we didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. For 10 years I've existed on the periphery of this family. You've had no interest in Emma's life, in her achievements, in who she's becoming. You erased us, and now you want to pretend it never happened because there's money involved. Rebecca was sobbing now. Sarah, please. David's business. Our house. We'll lose everything. The boys, their school. You should have thought about that before you committed federal crimes. Michael cleared his throat. I should mention that the court has already issued orders for immediate possession of all properties and assets. Sheriff's deputies will be serving papers within the hour. The room fell silent except for Rebecca's crying. What does that mean? David asked, his voice hollow. It means you need to vacate the house immediately, Michael said. It means all bank accounts are frozen pending transfer to Sarah. It means the FBI will be investigating the mortgage fraud. FBI? David's voice cracked. Mortgage fraud involving amounts over $100,000 is a federal crime. You borrowed $400,000 against property you didn't own. That carries a potential sentence of up to 30 years in federal prison. Rebecca collapsed back onto the couch. 30 years? For each count. You could be looking at conspiracy charges as well. I watched my family crumble, and I felt empty, not satisfied, not vindicated, just hollow. These people had shaped my entire life, had made me question my worth for 3 decades, and now they looked so small and pathetic. Sarah, Dad said quietly, what can we do? How can we fix this? I looked at him. This man who had never once told me he was proud of me, who had dismissed every achievement, who had let Rebecca erase me from family photos and family gatherings. You can't fix 32 years of making me feel worthless, Dad. You can't fix missing Emma's entire life. You can't fix the fact that when I needed my family most, you chose Rebecca over me without even knowing the facts. But we're still family. No, I said firmly. You stopped being my family the day you decided I didn't matter. Rebecca said it herself 10 years ago. I'm just someone who shares your last name. I stood up and moved toward the door. Michael will handle the legal proceedings. I don't want any of you contacting me or Emma unless it's through an attorney. Sarah, wait, Mum called out. "Please, we can work this out. We can be a family again." I paused at the door and turned back to face them one last time. "You want to know what's funny? If you had just been kind to Emma at her party, if you had celebrated her achievement, if you had made her feel welcome and loved, I probably would have shared everything with you. I probably would have made sure you were all taken care of." Rebecca looked up at me with desperate eyes. "It's not too late. We can start over." "Yes, it is too late. You had 32 years to love me. You had one afternoon to be kind to my daughter. You failed both tests." I walked out of that office and didn't look back. An hour later, I was standing in front of the house in Westfield Heights, my house, watching sheriff's deputies serve eviction papers to Rebecca and David. Neighbours had come out of their houses to watch the spectacle, drawn by the police cars and the shouting. Rebecca saw me standing at the end of the driveway and ran toward me, still crying. "Sarah, please. The boys don't understand what's happening." "Where are we supposed to go? You should have thought about that before you stole from me." "I'll pay it all back. Every penny. Just please don't make us homeless." I looked at this woman who had tormented me my entire life, who had stolen my inheritance, who had cruelly dismissed my daughter's achievements, and I felt nothing but pity. "Rebecca, you've had 5 years to do the right thing. You've had 5 years to tell me the truth about Grandma's will. Instead, you chose to live a lie built on money that was never yours. But David's business will fail because it was built on stolen money. Your lifestyle, your cars, your vacations, all of it was paid for with money my grandmother left to ensure Emma and I would be secure. You stole my daughter's future to fund your present." One of the deputies approached us. "Mum, we need you to step back. The family needs to gather their immediate belongings and vacate the premises." I watched as Rebecca and David loaded suitcases into their cars, their 2 boys confused and crying. For a moment, I almost felt guilty. Almost. But then I remembered Emma's face at the party. I remembered the note. I remembered 32 years of being invisible. As their cars pulled away, Rebecca rolling down her window for one last desperate plea that I pretended not to hear. I walked up to the front door of my house and used the key Michael had given me. The house was beautiful. Hardwood floors, crown moulding, a gourmet kitchen that looked like something from a magazine. This was where Rebecca had been living for 5 years, posting Instagram photos of her perfect life, her perfect home, her perfect family. All of it built on money that belonged to me. I walked through the rooms slowly, taking inventory. Rebecca had good taste, I had to admit. But everything in this house, every stick of furniture, every piece of artwork, every luxury appliance had been bought with money my grandmother had intended for Emma and me. In the master bedroom, I found something that made my breath catch. A framed photo of Rebecca and our grandmother, taken maybe a year before Grandma died. They were smiling, arms around each other, looking like the perfect granddaughter and grandmother. But I remembered that day. I had taken that photo. I'd driven Grandma to Rebecca's house for what Rebecca claimed was a special grandmother-granddaughter day. But when I arrived to pick Grandma up, I found her sitting alone in the living room while Rebecca talked on the phone in the kitchen about weekend plans that didn't include her grandmother. She barely spoke to me. Grandma had whispered to me on the drive home. She was more interested in her phone than in spending time with me. Yet here was the photo, prominently displayed, Rebecca's proof of their close relationship. I took the photo out of the frame and threw it in the trash. That evening I sat in our tiny apartment with Emma, trying to explain what was happening without overwhelming her 8-year-old mind. Mommy, are we really going to live in a big house? Yes, sweetheart. Great-Grandma Eleanor left us a house because she loved us very much. Why didn't Aunt Rebecca tell us about it? How do you explain theft and fraud to a child? How do you explain that some adults lie and cheat and hurt people for money? Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, baby. Aunt Rebecca made some very bad choices, and now she has to face the consequences. Will I see my cousins again? I thought about Mason and Tyler, Rebecca's boys. They were innocent in all this, victims of their mother's crimes just as much as Emma and I were. But they were also evidence of the life Rebecca had built on stolen money. I don't know, Emma. Maybe someday. I hope they're okay. Even if their mommy was mean to me, I don't want them to be sad. And there it was, the difference between my daughter and the family that had rejected her. Emma, even after being hurt and humiliated, still had empathy for others. She still worried about people who had been unkind to her. She was going to be a better person than any of us. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of screaming from outside our apartment window. I looked out to see Rebecca standing in the parking lot, still in her pajamas, holding a cell phone and shrieking at someone on the other end. "You don't understand! This is all a mistake! That house is mine! My sister is trying to steal everything!" I opened the window so I could hear better. "I don't care what the paperwork says. I've been living there for 5 years. You can't just freeze all my accounts." She was talking to a bank, I realized, trying to access money that no longer belonged to her. "This is my life, my children's lives. You have to do something." But there was nothing they could do. The court orders were clear. Every account Rebecca had been managing, every asset she'd been living off of, now belonged to me. I watched her pace back and forth in the parking lot, crying and shouting, and I thought about all the times I'd been the one crying, the one desperate, the one with nowhere to turn. All the times I'd called for help and been dismissed, ignored, erased. Emma appeared beside me at the window. "Mommy, why is Aunt Rebecca screaming?" "Because she just realized that actions have consequences, sweetheart." Rebecca looked up and saw us in the window. For a moment, our eyes met across the parking lot. In hers, I saw desperation, panic, and something else. The dawning realization that the sister she'd spent a lifetime dismissing had just destroyed her world. I closed the window and turned away. And later that morning, Michael called with updates. The FBI had opened an investigation into the mortgage fraud. Rebecca and David's assets had been seized. The rental properties that had been generating income were now under my control. "Sarah, you need to start thinking about what you want to do with all this. The house, the investments, the rental income, it's a lot to manage." I thought about Emma, about her bright future, about the college fund I'd been struggling to build $1 at a time. I want to set up a trust for Emma's education. I want to establish a scholarship fund for children from single-parent families. And Michael, I want to buy a small house for us. Nothing fancy, just something that's ours. What about the big house? It's worth $1.8 million. Sell it. I don't want to live in a house where Rebecca raised her children on my stolen money. Too many bad memories. Over the next few weeks, I watched from a distance as my family's world crumbled. Rebecca and David were arrested on federal fraud charges. My parents, desperate to help their daughter, hired expensive lawyers they couldn't afford. The local newspaper picked up the story. Local accountant and wife charged in million-dollar estate fraud. And suddenly, everyone knew what they'd done. Rebecca's perfect social media life disappeared overnight. Her Instagram account went private, then disappeared entirely. The community where she'd been so prominent, the PTA, the country club, the charity committees, turned their backs on her. David's accounting practice collapsed as clients fled, unwilling to trust their finances to someone who'd committed financial crimes. Mason and Tyler had to change schools after classmates' parents found out about the charges. I felt bad for the boys. They were innocent victims of their parents' crimes. But every time I started to feel too guilty, I remembered Emma's face at the party, remembered the note, remembered 32 years of being invisible. 3 months later, Emma and I moved into our new house, a modest 3-bedroom in a good school district with a big backyard and a swing set. Nothing like the mansion Rebecca had been living in, but it was ours, legally and completely. Emma loved her new room, loved having space to spread out her science projects and books. She'd made new friends at her new school, friends who appreciated her intelligence and kindness. "Mommy," she said one evening as I tucked her into bed, "I'm glad we moved here." "Are you? Even though it's smaller than Great-Grandma's big house?" "This feels like home." The big house felt like a museum, pretty but not very cozy. She was right. This house felt like ours in a way that mansion never could have. "Mommy, can I ask you something?" "Of course, baby." "Do you think Aunt Rebecca is sorry for being mean to me?" I considered the question carefully. Rebecca was facing federal prison time. Her marriage was under strain. Her children were struggling. Her perfect life had imploded completely. "I think Aunt Rebecca is sorry she got caught, sweetheart. Whether she's sorry for hurting you, I honestly don't know. I hope she learns to be nicer. Even if I don't see her again, I hope she learns." And there was Emma's beautiful heart again, hoping for the best, even for people who had hurt her. "You know what, baby? I think Great-Grandma Eleanor would be very proud of the person you're becoming." "Do you think she can see us in our new house?" "I think she can, and I think she's happy that we're finally safe and happy." Emma smiled and closed her eyes. "Tell her I said thank you, for the house and for loving you when you were little." After Emma fell asleep, I sat in our small but cozy living room and thought about everything that had changed. 6 months ago, I was a struggling single mother working 2 jobs and wondering how I'd ever pay for Emma's college. Now, Emma's education was fully funded. We owned our home outright, and I had enough money invested to never have to worry about our security again. But more than the money, I had something I'd never had before. Proof that I mattered. Proof that I was loved. Proof that my grandmother had seen my worth even when my own family couldn't. Rebecca's trial was scheduled for next month. She'd already lost the house, lost David's business, lost her social standing, lost her children's respect. The prosecutor was seeking 5 to 10 years in federal prison. People asked me if I felt vindicated, if I was satisfied with her punishment. The truth was more complicated than that. I felt free. For 32 years I'd carried the weight of my family's rejection, wondered what was wrong with me, questioned my worth. Now I knew the truth. There was nothing wrong with me. I had been loved, valued, seen, just not by the people I'd expected to love me. My grandmother had seen past my family's treatment of me and recognized who I really was. She'd loved me enough to ensure Emma and I would be okay. She'd loved me enough to write a letter explaining why, loved me enough to make sure I knew I mattered. That was worth more than all the money in the world. Emma found me sitting there that night, apparently unable to sleep. "Mommy, are you sad?" "No, baby, I'm not sad." "Are you happy?" I pulled her onto my lap and held her close. "I'm grateful, sweetheart. I'm grateful we found out the truth. I'm grateful we have this house. I'm grateful Great-Grandma loved us enough to take care of us. And I'm grateful for you, Mummy. You're the best family I could ever want." As I tucked my daughter back into bed in our home, our real home, built on love instead of lies, I realised something that would have surprised the broken woman I'd been just 6 months earlier. I didn't need Rebecca's apology. I didn't need my parents' recognition. I didn't need my family's acceptance or approval. I had something better. I had the truth. I had my grandmother's love. I had Emma's pure heart. I had a future free from the people who had spent a lifetime making me feel small. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever questioned your worth because the people who were supposed to love you couldn't see your value, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally just can't. But that doesn't mean you're not worthy of love. Emma fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, secure in the knowledge that she was loved, valued, and safe. And watching her sleep, I realized that my grandmother's greatest gift wasn't the money or the house. It was the chance to give my daughter what I'd never had, the absolute certainty that she mattered.